October 23, 1935, 10:15 p.m., the Palace Chophouse, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz was sitting in a back booth with 3 of his top men, talking business over steaks and whiskey. The restaurant was nearly empty. A few waiters lingered near the kitchen. The smell of cigar smoke hung in the air. He had no idea that in exactly 17 minutes, 2 men would walk through the front door and put an end to his life. The order had come from the top, from Lucky Luciano himself. But here's the twist that makes this story unlike any other in Mafia history. Lucky didn't kill Dutch Schultz because he was a rival. He didn't kill him over territory or money or respect. Lucky Luciano killed Dutch Schultz to protect a man named Thomas Dewey, the prosecutor who was trying to put every gangster in New York behind bars. The Mafia murdered one of its own to save the life of its greatest enemy. And the reason why reveals everything you need to know about how Lucky Luciano thought differently than every other boss in America. To understand what happened that night in Newark, you need to understand who Dutch Schultz was and why he had become a problem that couldn't be solved any other way. Arthur Flegenheimer, that was his real name, had built a criminal empire in the Bronx during Prohibition. Beer, numbers, rackets, protection by 1935. Dutch Schultz was one of the most powerful gangsters on the East Coast, pulling in millions of dollars a year. But unlike Lucky Luciano, Dutch Schultz was not a businessman. He was a maniac, violent, unpredictable. He tortured people for fun. He once murdered a man with his bare hands in front of a dozen witnesses because the man had looked at him the wrong way. The other bosses tolerated Schultz because he made money and because going to war with him would be expensive. But nobody trusted him. Nobody wanted to be in a room with him. And everybody knew that sooner or later, Dutch Schultz was going to do something so crazy that it would bring the whole world crashing down on all of them. That something was Thomas Dewey. In 1935, Thomas Dewey was a young, ambitious prosecutor with a perfect record and dreams of political glory. He was 33 years old, the same age as Lucky, with slicked back hair, a thin mustache, and the cold eyes of a man who believed absolutely in his own righteousness. He had been appointed special prosecutor to clean up organized crime in New York, and he was doing his job with terrifying efficiency. Dewey didn't just go after the street soldiers, he went after the bosses. He followed the money. He flipped witnesses. He built cases that couldn't be beaten. And in the summer of 1935, Thomas Dewey set his sights on Dutch Schultz. The investigation was relentless. Dewey's men were everywhere, interviewing witnesses, subpoenaing records, squeezing anyone who had ever done business with the Dutchman. Schultz could feel the walls closing in. His accountants were being arrested. His lawyers were being watched. Every day brought new headlines about the crusading prosecutor and his war on the gangsters. Dutch Schultz was not the kind of man who waited quietly for trouble to come to him. He decided to solve the problem the only way he knew how. He would kill Thomas Dewey. When word of Schultz's plan reached Lucky Luciano, he knew immediately that this was the most dangerous moment in the history of organized crime. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. Lucky called an emergency meeting of the commission, the board of directors. He had created 4 years earlier after eliminating Mafia and Maranzano. The meeting took place in a private room at a Manhattan hotel. Around the table sat the most powerful criminals in America: Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Louis Lepsy, Albert Anastasia, Joe Adonis, Frank Costello, and Dutch Schultz himself, who had been summoned to explain his plan. Schultz laid it out without hesitation. He knew where Dewey lived. He knew his daily routine. Every morning, Dewey stopped at the same pharmacy to make phone calls. Schultz had already sent men to scout the location. The hit would be clean and simple. 1 bullet, and their problems would be over. "We kill Dewey," Schultz said, "and we send a message to every prosecutor in America. You come after us, you end up dead." The room was silent. Then Lucky Luciano spoke. "You want to kill a prosecutor," Lucky said slowly, his voice calm and cold. "A special prosecutor, appointed by the governor, a man whose face is on the front page of every newspaper in the city. And you think that solves our problems?" Schultz leaned forward. "Dewey is coming for all of us. Not just me. All of us. You think he's going to stop with the Dutchman? You're next, Luciano. Then Lapek, then everyone at this table." Lucky nodded. "Maybe. Probably. But let me ask you something, Dutch. What do you think happens after we kill Thomas Dewey?" Schultz shrugged. "They get scared. They back off. they find easier targets. No, Lucky said. That's not what happens. What happens is every cop in New York, every FBI agent in the country, every politician who ever looked the other way, they all come after us at once. They don't rest until every man at this table is dead or in prison. They pass new laws. They form new task forces. They turn this city into a war zone. Lucky paused and looked around the table. Right now, we're businessmen. We pay off cops. We buy judges. We operate in the shadows. We make money. The moment we kill Thomas Dewey, we become cop killers. Enemy number one. And everything we've built burns to the ground. The debate went on for hours. Schultz grew more agitated, more paranoid, more convinced that everyone was against him. Meyer Lansky, Lucky's closest ally, argued calmly for patience. Dewey is a prosecutor, Lansky said. Prosecutors come and go. This one wants to be governor someday. Let him have his headlines, let him make his cases, and eventually he moves on to politics. We survive, we adapt, we keep making money. But Schultz wasn't listening. His face was red. His hands were shaking. You're all cowards, he shouted. Every one of you. Sitting here talking about patience while Dewey puts a noose around our necks? Fine. You don't want to help me? I'll do it myself. I'll kill Dewey with or without your permission. The room went silent. Every man at that table understood what Schultz had just done. He had defied the commission. He had announced that he would act alone, regardless of the vote. He had made himself a problem that could not be ignored. After Schultz stormed out, Lucky called for a vote. The question was simple. What do we do about Dutch Schultz? The discussion was brief. Everyone understood the stakes. If Schultz killed Dewey, the entire organization would suffer the consequences. Every boss at that table would lose everything. Their freedom, their businesses, possibly their lives. But if they stopped Schultz, if they eliminated the threat before it could materialize, things would continue as they were. The cops would keep taking bribes. The judges would keep looking the other way. The money would keep flowing. It wasn't even a difficult decision. The vote was unanimous. Dutch Schultz had to die. There was no other way. Lucky turned to Albert Anastasia, the head of what would later be called Murder, Inc. Make it clean, Lucky said quietly. Make it fast, and make sure everyone knows it wasn't personal. It was strictly business. Anastasia nodded. He already had men in mind for the job. Charlie, the bug workman, and Mendy Weiss, two of the most efficient killers in the organization. The hit was scheduled for that same week. October 23, 1935, Dutch Schultz had no idea that the commission had signed his death warrant. He was in Newark, across the river from Manhattan, meeting with his top lieutenants at the Palace Chophouse. The restaurant was quiet that night. Schultz sat in a back booth with three men, Otto Berman, his accountant, Abe Landau, his bodyguard, and Bernard Lulu Rosenkrantz, another trusted soldier. They were discussing business, how to handle the Dewey investigation, how to move money around, how to survive the pressure. At 10:32 p.m., two men walked through the front door of the Palace Chophouse. Charlie Workman headed straight for the back booth. Mendy Weiss stayed near the entrance, covering the door. Schultz had gotten up from the table a few minutes earlier to use the bathroom. He wasn't there when Workman opened fire. The first bullets hit Otto Berman, who collapsed onto the table. Landau and Rosenkrantz went for their guns, but Workman was faster. In seconds, all three men were down, bleeding out on the floor of the restaurant. Charlie Workman kicked open the bathroom door and found Dutch Schultz standing at the urinal, the most feared gangster in the Bronx, caught with his pants down. Workman didn't hesitate. He fired once, hitting Schultz in the abdomen. Schultz staggered, but didn't fall. He looked at Workman with something like confusion in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe this was how it ended. Then he collapsed against the wall, sliding down to the tile floor. Workman left him there, bleeding, and walked calmly out of the restaurant. The whole thing had taken less than 2 minutes. Dutch Schultz didn't die right away. He was rushed to Newark City Hospital, where he lingered for almost 22 hours. The doctors couldn't save him. The bullet had torn through his intestines. In his final hours, Schultz drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling deliriously. Police stenographers recorded his last words, hoping for a confession or the names of his killers. But Schultz just rambled fragments of sentences, names that meant nothing, fever dreams of a dying man. "A boy has never wept nor dashed 1,000 kim," he said at one point. Mother is the best bet, and don't let Satan draw you too fast. He never named his killers. At 8:35 p.m. on October 24th, Dutch Schultz was pronounced dead. The underworld got the message immediately. Dutch Schultz had been killed by his own people. Not by rivals, not by cops, but by the commission itself. Within hours, every gangster from New York to Chicago knew what had happened and why. The hit sent a clear signal to every criminal in America. Nobody was above the rules, not even a boss as powerful as the Dutchman. If you threatened the organization, if you put your personal vendettas above the collective good, you would be eliminated without hesitation. And here's the part that most people miss when they tell this story. Thomas Dewey never knew how close he had come to dying. He never knew that a room full of gangsters had voted to save his life. He went on prosecuting organized crime with the same relentless energy, eventually convicting Lucky Luciano himself on prostitution charges in 1936. Dewey became district attorney, then governor of New York, then the Republican nominee for president twice. He lived until 1971, dying peacefully of a heart attack at the age of 6. And he owed that long life, at least in part, to the men he had spent his career trying to destroy. Lucky Luciano understood something that Dutch Schultz never could. He understood that organized crime was a business, and like any business, it required stability. It required rules that everyone followed. It required the discipline to think long-term, even when short-term action felt satisfying. Killing Thomas Dewey would have felt good for a moment. It would have eliminated an immediate threat, but it would have destroyed everything Lucky had built the commission. The alliances, the carefully constructed system of bribes and favors that allowed the Mafia to operate in the shadows. Dutch Schultz couldn't see past his own anger. That blindness killed him. Lucky saw the whole board. He saw that protecting Dewey protected the organization. He saw that sacrificing one boss was better than losing everything. And he made the hard decision, the business decision, without emotion, without hesitation, without regret. Years later, when Lucky was living in exile in Italy, a journalist asked him about Dutch Schultz. "The Dutchman was a friend of yours, wasn't he?" The journalist asked, "Did it bother you to give that order?" Lucky lit a cigarette slowly and stared out at the Bay of Naples. "Dutch was never anyone's friend," he said. "Dutch was a bomb waiting to go off. The only question was whether he'd take us all with him when he exploded. He took a long drag. We built something. The commission, rules, structure, a way for everyone to make money without killing each other every 5 minutes. Dutch Schultz wanted to tear it all down because he was scared of one prosecutor. One man, Lucky, shook his head. "I didn't kill Dutch because I wanted to. I killed him because he left me no choice. He was going to destroy everything, not just for himself, but for all of us." The journalist pressed further. "But you saved Thomas Dewey's life, the man who put you in prison." Lucky smiled, that cold, thin smile. "Dewey put me in prison for 12 years. Dutch Schultz would have put me in the ground forever. I made the smart choice. If this story of how Lucky Luciano killed a gangster to save a prosecutor gave you chills, smash that subscribe button right now. We're telling the stories they couldn't put in The Godfather. The real history of the chairman of the mob. Drop a like if you understand why the commission voted to protect their own enemy. And in the comments, would you have made the same choice? Kill a fellow boss to save a man who wanted to destroy you. Hit that notification bell because next time we're telling the story of what happened when Thomas Dewey finally caught Lucky Luciano and the deal that got him out of prison. Don't miss it.